going back to some things you were talking about when you're like tracking these deer on dry ground and you're kind of going in and finding these areas. You're talking about finding good sign and hot sign. What are you considering like good sign or like that you're looking at that's fresh?
Mostly it's going to be tracks for me.
Okay.
I'm going a lot off of footprints. Like I'll like if I see a rub, I'm like, okay, sweet, a rub. That means I can walk up to it and see if there's a track on the ground from the deer that made it. You know, I'm really concerned about the foot. Because there's only so many deer in the woods that make a 200-pound track. You know,
Yeah.
and I'm sure like there's some areas around me that have really big rack deer but smaller bodies, and I'm sure I've walked right past some really magnum deer over the years. But if you look at my history of what I've been shooting a lot of deer like 190 to 200 pounds because I'm always going off foot size.
The track.
And
Yeah.
then most of the time it means it's got big rack tail. You know,
What's a good rule of thumb for people like when they're identifying a track to know it's like a mature buck or a heavy buck?
it all depends on where you live, because you got different. Like around here, I go with like a four-finger track.
Hmm.
Like I want at least like it to be. I got really big fingers, so I need a tape measure. It'd probably be like 3.5 inches
Yeah.
wide. And then it would be like probably 4 inches long.
Yeah. That
You know,
makes sense. And two,
I'm
like I mean,
looking I'm looking for a rounded toe too. I want a more rounded out toe because if it's long and sharp, it's usually a big deer that's younger because they don't wear their hooves out as much. Once they get older, they start getting big chips in the hooves and stuff, and they start wearing the toes down and grinding them out. So you can almost see like they get like wide in the toe. It's like flattened out. Like you can see where it just worn out, like an old sneaker.
yeah.
You know,
I
so
love when you find the ones that are like all crooked and like you can just tell
mhm.
like the toes want like there was a buck that I remember I'd always find his track and it was just like he had this crooked toe and it was like that was the easiest buck to be able to identify
Yeah,
because he was so it was so
yeah, you got
obvious.
one busted toe.
Yeah.
I've hunted deer like that. I had one that had a short toe. He
Really?
had like yeah, it was like he had one long toe and the other one was about the half the length. So you as soon as you saw him, you knew exactly what deer it was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really funny, and two, like, I mean, I'm sure that'd be harder on like dry ground because you're finding like a single track that's giving you that information. But like in the snow, I like looking at ones that are wide apart, like the
Yeah,
footprints are
yeah,
wide, like width apart, because then it means like they probably have a pretty big barrel chest on them.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Sometimes you can find that when you're walking in bare ground too. Like they'll cross a muddy patch. You can get tracks and you can measure the width, or they cross a brook or something, a stream, and they get to the sand on the brook or something. Or if they walk through moss, you can get an imprint where and measure the width, or even leaves. Sometimes if the leaves are wet enough, you can get like the little pock marks in the leaves as they go. But moss is really good because moss has a spring back to it.
yeah,
So if you
yeah.
if you see where deer are walking through moss and you can see that imprint in the moss, it took a certain amount of hours for it to rise back up. So it tells you how far behind you are a lot of times.
Ah, that's a good tip. I would not have thought of that.
Yep.
Yeah, because like you think, yeah, moss is kind of like carpet. Like when you go down on it
Hmm.
and it, comes back up. Like for example, you have a chair sitting on a carpet for a while, it'll wear down, but when you
Yep.
remove that chair after a while, it comes back up.
Yep. It's even like dirt. It's critical to age a track. Like even in dirt, like it's going to be a lot crisper when they first step in the dirt. Then a couple hours later, it's going to start kind of crumbling and moving out. You know, and that could be the difference between you going to the right location or the wrong one. If you find where that deer is going back and forth,
Yeah,
you'll be like, okay, his track's a lot fresher going this way. and you just got to look at those subtle little things. A lot of people mess up and they'll walk right through it and step right on the sign, and then they won't be able to read it. So like when I'm like following a deer, I always try to walk right off to the edge of the deer trails or something. So if I gotta turn around and go back, I might pick something I missed. I try not to tamper with the sign I'm following. Just like when you're blood trailing a
Well, I
deer.
was just gonna say, just like blood trail on a deer. That's
Yeah, yeah,
exactly right.
it's the same thing. You're just doing it the whole time you're hunting.
Yeah, that's been ingrained in my head because my dad would yell at me all the time if we'd be tracking a deer and I'd be like walking in the tracks like, no,
Mhm.
stay off to the side, and to in
Yeah,
case we miss something or we lose the blood and need to go back and figure out the track and all that different stuff. That's a
yeah.
really good tip.